When studying philosophy, students often take whole courses in the history of philosophy. A typical undergraduate program in philosophy, this is usually composed of several survey courses that are usually divided between ancient, medieval, modern, and postmodern philosophy, contemporary philosophy. So, in any of the subdivisions of philosophy, for example, metaphysics or epistemology or ethics, these topics will show up in the various periods of the history of philosophy. Now, the periods of the history of philosophy are sometimes arbitrarily drawn. So, for example, the shift from what we might call medieval philosophy to modern philosophy, or modern philosophy to postmodern philosophy, or ancient to medieval philosophy. Any of those transitions are always kind of a bit vague, or a bit like the terms child to adult, or say infant to toddler, or something like that. Or as a small kid, a little boy to a big boy. As when do you become a big boy if you're a kid, right? But in any of these periods of philosophy, the topics of philosophy will also flow with that history. And sometimes you can take a topic in philosophy and then look at it in those various periods. So in this presentation, that's what I'm going to be focusing on, but I'm going to be focusing on truth. So truth has a history to it in the history of philosophy, and will appear in a variety of ways in those periods. So I take the correspondence view of truth to be the primary view of truth that is most reasonable in the history of Western philosophy. And not everyone agrees with that, of course, but in this presentation I want to offer you some reflections on the way in which the correspondence theory has its own history. So this survey will give a few examples of philosophical reflection on truth from these major periods. And this historical division, again, is meant to follow a typical division of the history of philosophy as it's taught in various majors, areas of study. If you get a degree in philosophy in American universities, this is pretty typical. The history division, again, is a bit arbitrary. Ideas do continue over long periods of time, and they overlap oftentimes with our sometimes artificial divisions of history, and sometimes there aren't these clear-cut lines by means of which we can sharply divide one historical period from another. But what I want to show is that philosophical reflection on truth has been fairly uniform throughout most of the history of Western philosophy up until the 19th, 20th, and early 21st centuries. Okay, so let's start with ancient literature. Now, this might even be proto-philosophy or pre-philosophy with ancient literature. So in the ancient Greek and Hebrew literature, there are frequent uses of the idea of truth. Aletheia, for example, in Greek, or emeth in Hebrew. These are two ancient terms. But in this section, this part of the video, I just want to point out a few things about these ideas which will be useful for my case that truth is important for human life. So let's start with some ideas from ancient Greek literature. For example, Hesiod's Works and Days and Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. There are a couple references to truth. For example, the use of aletheia, it's the Greek term. In Hesiod's Works and Days, he writes, quote, "Mark the days which come from Zeus, duly telling your slaves of them." Duly here, in this translation, is directly from the Greek aletheia, or truth. Hesiod here is indicating that the righteous man will speak what is true and tell how things really are regarding the days which the gods have given to them. Now, there are several uses of the idea of truth, aletheia, in Greek, in the Iliad. In the great chariot race of the Iliad, Homer uses the word truth when he refers to Phoenix, who is to be an umpire in the race, so that he can, quote, "mark the running and tell the truth thereof." Now, when someone judges reality, they are looking for the truth, for the way things really are. Right? That's one of the central points about truth, especially understanding truth as correspondence. You're dealing with reality, how things are. And the ancient Greek pagans really understood this. I don't use the term pagan pejoratively here. just a description of their religious tradition. And again, back with Hesiod, duly telling your slaves of them. So when someone is speaking truth, the righteous man will speak what is true, telling how things really are. Here's another spot in the Iliad. Homer presents Priam. Okay, my Greek ain't so good. Don't hablo Greek so good. But Priam is searching for the body of his dead son Hector among the Greeks, and he asks Achilles' squire to tell him all the truth, all the aletheia about Hector's body, where it has been preserved or cut to pieces or given to the dogs. In other words, Priam is looking for what is real and expects to be told about how things really are. He's asked to be told the truth. Okay, so again, truth has a deep connection to how things really are, to reality, to how things exist. Here's another Homeric example of the use of aletheia. It's found in the Odyssey. Odysseus is granted an audience with the dead and is able to converse with the shade of Achilles. Part of me thinks of Socrates. Apology whenever I talk about this story, right? Socrates thought, oh, this is great. I just die and my soul transmigrates to the underworld, the netherworld. I can talk to the old heroes, find out about virtue, and it's great job security for the philosopher. Anyway, that was not Odysseus' purpose here. Odysseus converses with the shade of Achilles, and Odysseus tells Achilles that he will speak the truth, the aletheia, about Achilles' son, Neoptolemus. And Odysseus is going to tell Achilles about what is real. Okay, again, this is the important point about truth here. This is, again, these in the Odyssey, the Iliad, the works of days, none of this is a philosophical account of truth. It's a description of truth understood as a connection to reality. Okay, so Odysseus' words are going to reflect what really occurred in the history of Neoptolemus' life. So in each of these cases, we see examples of truth understood as correspondence of belief to reality. None of these amount to a theory of truth, but they give us an idea of pre-philosophical reflections on truth, which is consistent with our common understanding of truth as matching of our thoughts with the world. Okay, so again, if you want to defend an understanding of truth as a connection of our mind to reality, how things actually are, then you have to think of it in terms of aletheia, in terms of connecting real being with what is in us. And again, this is not too different from what Aristotle says. To say of what is that it is to speak truly. Okay. So let's turn from the ancient Greek vision to the ancient Hebrew concept from the Torah. And here we will look at a couple of, well, not just the Torah, but the entire Hebrew Bible. The Torah, the Nevi'im, the Ketuvim, the Tanakh, right? Okay. So, for example, in the Torah, in the law, there's a very clear injunction against falsehood in the Ten Commandments. It's one of the big 10. Leviticus 19:11 simply states, "You shall not lie." If you were to formalize this using traditional categorical logic, the claim would be, feel like nerding out a little bit, God didn't do this way, probably because it'd be really boring to listen to. No things that you say are things that are lies. Now, by a version, changing the quality of the statement or replacing the predicate term with its term complement, the command would be, all things that you say are things which are non-lies. And that seems to me to amount to, logically at least, tell the truth. Now, so it's very clear in the Hebrew scriptures and the Torah that falsehood is condemned and telling the truth is praised. In the Nevi'im and the prophets in the Hebrew Bible, there are references also to truth, which have philosophical import. Biblical claims about truth in prophetic literature indicate the seriousness with which truth was valued by God, and what happened when things got really bad for those who were under God's judgment. For example, various truths of judgments on the nation of Israel, see Isaiah 59:14, for example, truth has stumbled in the streets. In Jeremiah 7:28, truth has perished. And in Daniel 8:12, truth was thrown to the ground. Now it seems that in each of these cases, the loss of truth serves as a part of God's judgment. Truth was a very, very serious matter, and the loss of it in the lives of people, a grave one. In fact, introducing divine wrath and judgment. Now, not just in the prophets, prophetically speaking, but also in the literature, in the writings of the Hebrews, in Scripture. You don't have to look very far other than, say, the book of Proverbs, chapter 23, verse 23, to see God's emphasis on the value of truth. The wise one says, "Buy the truth and do not sell it." So truth was something, along with wisdom, that was extremely valuable, more so than worldly wealth. So I think it's safe to summarize the Hebrew Bible's view of truth as being a concept of something that is central to an ethical and moral life. It's a serious matter if truth is lost, and truth is something of great value to be treasured in one's life. Now, these ideas played a central role in the nation of Israel's relationship to God. These ideas don't amount to a theory of the nature of truth so much as a moral commitment to truth. But at least in the commandment against falsehood, the emphasis is on talking faithfully about how things really are. Now, this is very similar to the Greek concept of truth as accurately representing reality as it is, and is familiar to anyone who's experienced truth in the common sense ways that I've presented elsewhere. So that's a little bit of a background of truth in the history of Western philosophy as it shows up kind of pre-philosophically in some examples from Greek literature and from the ancient Hebrew literature from the Bible. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this discussion of truth.
Stay psyched, Grom. You.